The following video contains major spoilers for the anime and manga series Death Note. If you're unfamiliar with the story and want to experience it fresh, this is your cue to pause and return later. Don't worry, I'll still be here. But if you're choosing to stick around anyway, well, I trust you've either seen it, read it, or you're just very curious. Either way, welcome. Hello, and welcome to a project I've been slowly building up for a long time. I started working on this back in May of 2023 and, well, time really flies when you're trying to untangle one of anime's most debated conclusions. Like many of you, I appreciate a well-crafted story, especially when it invites you to dig deeper, ask questions, and reconsider what you think you know. Death Note is one of those rare series that has managed to hold its place in the cultural conversation for years, and for good reason. The psychological tension, the character dynamics, the moral ambiguity, it's all been picked apart and put back together countless times. But one conversation has always stood out to me. The ending. Specifically, Nier's final confrontation with Light. The plan that ultimately brings Kira down. Over time, a theory has gained traction, suggesting that Nier's plan falls apart under scrutiny. That it's too convenient, too perfect, or simply implausible when you break it down. This video is the first in a series where I tend to take a closer look at that claim. The purpose of this video is simply to introduce the series and establish what my goals will be with it, as well as giving a bit of background into why I'm doing this. So, a few years ago, I was an active user in the Death Note subreddit. Viewers who were around during that time may remember me as user It's Just Paul, an account that I've since deleted, but during its activity, I admittedly got invested in overanalyzing this series, conducting introspectives on a few characters and providing my opinions on events within the story. It was there that I became exposed to the concept of people not liking the ending. I guess more specifically, I was introduced to the video Death Note's Ending is a Lie by the channel So You Think You Know, who I will herein be referring to as Psytic. Brief disclaimer here, I have actually spoken with the creator of this video on very pleasant terms, and it should be noted that he acknowledges a few mistakes in his original video but still stands by his conclusion. I respect his commitment and his transparency, and I personally hope that he enjoys this series if he ever sees it. Psytic, if you're watching this, I'm glad to have you. Now, back to it. This and the Death Note video by Film Theory have been used by a number of people within the fandom to support the argument that the ending is impossible. But of course, every debate has its opposing force, and a good few people I knew in the Reddit days were very vocal and well-informed on debunking these claims. But seeing as there's one video that delves into this subject, I thought it was high time someone make a response. And so that's what I want to do here. My goal is to offer a clear and logical counterpoint, to provide a fuller picture of what the story actually gives us. Because when you account for all the information, especially the details in the manga, I believe the ending holds up far better than it's given credit for. So before we get into the deeper analysis, let's take a moment to outline the main points that fuel the Nier's plan doesn't work argument. To be clear, I don't believe that these arguments are coming from a place of dishonesty. In most cases, it seems to stem from a general and valid misunderstanding, either due to how the anime presents certain scenes, or from discussions where details have been simplified, omitted, or misrepresented over time. The most common objections tend to be, Mikami was writing in the Death Note for 2 months. Mikami knew he was being followed. Light and Misa had previously written in that same notebook. Gevanni couldn't have copied all the names in one night. The microscope scene with Mikami. The bank vault was too easily breached. And the broader claim that Death Note really ends when L dies. And that the rest of the series was a forced continuation when the author was pressured by Shonen Jump to continue the series. Throughout this series, I'll be addressing these points one by one, using the manga as a primary reference. Not because the anime is irrelevant, but because it often leaves out key details that are essential to understanding how everything works. and those details matter. In fact, if you'll bear with me for just a few minutes, I'd like to go on a bit of a tangent. I'm sure we all know that when it comes to adaptations, committing a literary work to the screen isn't always a one-to-one translation. Yeah, it happens. A film doesn't always contain everything from a book. But that doesn't mean it can't still be an enjoyable experience. I mean, look at Lord of the Rings. Those movies remove a lot from the books, but they're still an enjoyable experience, as are the books themselves. They provide different experiences while still hitting necessary plot points to move the story along. The films, I think most would agree, go so far as to provide a different experience from the books, from telling the same story in a different way. The point I'm getting at here is that while adapting a book to film or TV, it's not gonna have everything from the book. But so long as the experience is presented differently enough to create its own experience while telling a satisfying story, you should be okay. I mean, that's a very oversimplified version of what I'm talking about, but I'm sure you know what I mean. The problem with Death Note is that, as an adaptation, it just doesn't do anything to justify the cuts that it makes in the story. And boy, does it make some cuts. The series director, Tetsuro Araki, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and the studio, Madhouse, seem to make the decision to remove an absurd amount of content from the manga in what I can only assume was an effort to finish the series by some kind of deadline. This does not bode well for the anime, since many of the cuts they make are from the second half of the story after L's death, and most of the things they cut are very much to the detriment of the characters and the story. The manga has a whole sequence where the US government hires what I believe are mercenaries from the Middle East to launch an assault on Mello's hideout, prior to Light and the task force doing the same thing. It obviously does not end well, but I think losing this can be forgiven. But if it were only things like this, or the scene early on where Light talks about resting for a little while in the middle of his killings to ease his own mind, I mean, this is a great moment that adds a lot of depth to his character, but whatever. It would be fine. There wouldn't be a problem. Except they cut so much more. I'll be getting into a lot more of the details in the following videos, but to summarize here, the anime removes so much of the major contextual content of the manga during the successor arc, but still has events taking place that require that context to make sense. Imagine for a moment that in The Lord of the Rings, Aragorn just told Theoden that the beacons were lit, removed the whole sequence of Gandalf and Pippin going to Minas Tirith and meeting Denethor and ultimately lighting the first beacon. Or imagine if Gollum weren't still there to guide Frodo and Sam to Mordor, but we still see them approaching the Black Gates, only to switch directions and head through Shelob's lair with no indication of why they did that to begin with. That is basically what happened with Death Note. There's a particularly infamous scene where Nier gets glowy eyes, the camera circles around him all dramatically, and he just looks at a TV screen with Mikami's face on it and he says, "That guy, he's the Executor." And that's it. There's no explanation given for why Nier concludes with this, and we just move on to the next scene. In the manga, however, there's actually a couple of pages dedicated to Nier's whole thought process, where he carefully considers the evidence he has so far and uses that to come to a conclusion of suspecting Mikami. And I wish this was the worst of it. I wish I could tell you that Nier randomly entering the Avatar state and pointing to a TV was the only thing the anime did wrong with the second half. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And I can tell you that's not the case, because if it were, you wouldn't be watching this video, because I wouldn't be making it. Instead, what we get is Nier's plan presented so carelessly that it's no wonder people have such a problem with it. Essentially what happens is this. Light's whole plan is to have Mikami and Kiyomi Takeda coordinate use of a fake notebook Mikami constantly carries with pages from the real notebook that Mikami sends to Takeda for her to use, while the real notebook is being unused and is kept in Mikami's safe deposit box. Mikami, having the Shinigami eyes, acts in full view of Gevanni, who he knows is following him, by taking a picture of a man with his own phone and presumably writing his name down, killing him. In reality, what he does is he sends that picture to Takeda along with the man's name so she can write it down while he appears to kill the man himself. This is done intentionally to fool the SPK into thinking that he has the real notebook, and essentially lure them in so they attempt to tamper with his fake notebook. Then, on the day of the meeting, Light feels confident that they've succeeded, and Mikami has the real notebook so he can kill everyone in the warehouse, only sparing Light because Mikami would be unable to see his lifespan due to Light owning a Death Note by that time. Nier admits in the manga that this plan actually worked, and he very likely would have been killed if it hadn't been for one major factor: Mello. Mello kidnapping Takeda was something neither Light or Nier had anticipated, and it was through this that Gevanni was able to suspect that Mikami could be hiding something in the bank, since Mikami goes there outside of his routine. And I mean, he is methodically routine. Mikami only ever went to the bank on the 25th of every month, which is why Gevanni, who had been trailing him for a few months by that point, found it so strange that he went to the bank again the next day. This is how he ends up discovering the real notebook, which he then takes, replicates, and replaces with the replication. And it is this act that people argue is impossible. And this very same act that I intend to defend. Because while the anime delivers a surface-level explanation for all of this, the explanation in the manga is much deeper and more detailed, presenting timelines and circumstances that the anime omits entirely. And on top of this, I still very much have other arguments that I want to talk about that seem to want to explain why Death Note's writing, quote-unquote, gets bad. It doesn't. Again, this is the fault of the anime for giving us a shoddy adaptation of the second half, but it gave way to the idea that Oba was somehow forced to continue the series beyond L's death. And researching this to find a way to counter it has led me to some fascinating discoveries, but that'll have to wait until later in the series. So here we are then. This is my video series that I've made to talk about one of the most controversial, I think, maybe, probably, endings in anime history. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Grab a walking stick and follow along while I take you through our quest of debunking the biggest lie in Death Note. Hi, how you doing? This is me, Ian, at the end of the video. Speaking a little off the cuff here because I want to say a couple things. Firstly, thank you for watching this introductory video. I never expected that this would ever see the light of day because 2 years ago, when I first started working on this, the script that I had originally was very angry, very reactionary. It was designed mostly just to bash Cytic, and look, the guy doesn't deserve that. But I came to the conclusion after some time of working on myself and putting things in retrospect, I didn't want this to be an angry project. I wanted this to be educational, informative, and enjoyable. With any luck, it'll at least be enjoyable. But something that I never really said throughout the video is that, well, this is gonna sound a little paradoxical, but don't take anybody's word for anything on the internet. That's a large part of why I wanted to make this series, is because a lot of people just kind of parrot the same information. Like Cytic's video has inconsistencies, it has incorrect information, and people just kind of use that information to win an argument or will believe it at face value. Don't do that to yourself. Don't just believe whatever's on the internet. And I realize that that's going to be hypocritical coming from me, the guy making a whole series of videos to present a counter argument, but don't take my word for it either. Really. Like, if you really want to know this stuff, pick up the manga. Read it for yourself. I will link a website in the description where you can read the manga for free. I mean, you know, use an ad blocker. Please use an ad blocker if you want to avoid pop-ups and redirecting to spam websites in Windows, but read it. All the information is right there. And it's a great story. It's not a 10 out of 10. There are a lot of perfectly goofy moments that do not make sense, but hey, nobody's perfect. So, yeah, do the research. Come to your own conclusions, because that's how I got here. This is just me recounting to you what I've learned. And if you learn something else, great, but enjoy it at the end of the day, because that's the most important part. So, there you go. I'm gonna wrap this up now, because, I've got dinner to make, and, a whole other set of videos that I still need to make for this series, so I'm gonna get to work. And hey, if you get tired of waiting for the next video to come out, or at any point during this series, if you decide you want to see some other stuff, you can always check out the rest of the channel. My wife and I have some pretty fun gameplay videos. Our personal favorite is Halo Combat Evolved. We had a lot of fun with that one. That was great. I also have some lo-fi music that I've been working on. Pretty chill, nice and fun. I like it. I'm proud of it. I have a very crudely edited together Pokemon Red and Nuzlocke series. That was interesting. Emotional. But then again, you don't have to watch my videos either. You could also always check out some other really awesome content creators. Check out Popcorn over here. Excellent videos. Chill dude. They're both super chill, actually. Check out their Little Nightmares videos. Those are very fun. Those are great. I personally enjoyed them. Or you could check out Just Jimmy over here. That's my best friend, man. He's awesome. Excellent writer. Excellent storyteller. Very entertaining videos. Like, no, and I'm not even kidding about the excellent writer bit. If you've ever heard of the Spider-Man and My Hero Academia crossover fanfiction, he wrote that. That was him. He's got some videos about it on his channel. Really cool stuff. I'm going to link that fanfiction in the description. And Jimmy, you can't stop me from doing that. Love you, buddy. Then again, if you're in for a more long-form analysis type content, or if you just want some plushy filled fun, Skitty Bitty has a whole over 3-hour video tearing into Tears of the Kingdom. A great video that I cannot recommend enough. Also, a lot of other fun videos on there too. Just made a Silk Song video, like a compiled first 7 hours of the gameplay that they had a lot of fun with. And you know, I haven't played Hollow Knight, I haven't played Silk Song. I know very little about it, but it's there. It's great content. You can't go wrong with Skitty. So yeah, check those people out. Have fun with it. Enjoy the content where it lies. And hopefully I will have something new out and about relatively soon. Until then, thank you again for joining me. Take care.